Hi everyone, and welcome to this online masterclass, 5 key ways to transform your relationship with food and your body. My name is Kirsty Alderfield and I'm an entrepreneur, owner of Barina and mother of one. I have the honor and privilege of introducing your host today. She's someone who has a truly special gift in helping people, and she's changed my life for the better in so many ways, professionally and personally, and I know she'll change yours too. Over the years, I've spent time watching the work she does and have been lucky enough to offer my advice from my own experiences and my business knowledge to help her grow her business. So without further ado, I introduce Louise Jeffrey, who will take you through this session today.
Hi, thank you, Kirsty. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. Really appreciate it. Okay, so everyone, my name is Louise Jeffrey, and I help men and women who struggle with weight and eating challenges to transform their relationship with food and with their body so they can live the life they want to live and love the body they have. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about me later, but I'd just like to say how excited I am to have you all on this call today. Eating psychology is my passion, and I'm deeply committed to helping you to reach a place of peace with food and with your body. So what I'd like to do is just start with a few technical details about the call. We're going to be together for about 2 hours today. I'm going to share some really great content with you, and we're going to do a couple of experiential exercises. We've got quite a lot to get through, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule breaks for your questions at specific times throughout the call today. So at approximately 20 to 30 minute intervals. If I see a question pop up on the chat box, I will try to answer it. But probably what will happen is I'll make sure that I get to it at the break. When there are a lot of questions popping up, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to kind of get to them in the midst of speaking and staying on track. But please use this opportunity today to ask questions. What I'd like to say is that the more you participate, the more you're going to get out of this. And what I want is to be sure to give you the most value possible in our time together today. Okay, so from a technical perspective in terms of Zoom, if you want to ask a question, if you're on a Mac or a laptop, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. So if you look down to the bottom, you'll see something that says chat. If you click on that, it'll bring up a chat box on the right. And when you want to ask a question, please select chat with Louise privately rather than everyone, because what happens is if you send the chat or the message to everybody or the question, everybody will see it and it's a little bit distracting. So if you can select chat with me privately. If you're on the phone, to raise your hand to ask a question, just hit *9. And what we'll do is we'll chat verbally rather than via chat. So I'll try and get to your questions if I see that your hand is raised, in the break. I've also set up a Q&A call for a couple of days after this on Tuesday. So if we don't get to everybody's calls today, don't worry. I will be able to answer all of your questions in the Q&A in a couple of days. As I said to some of you when you were on the line earlier, this call is set up so that Zoom has all of your video off and that you're all muted. Please make sure that you stay muted unless I call on you to answer a question. Otherwise, we end up hearing a bit of feedback on the line. Okay? So towards the end of the class, I'm going to be sharing some really valuable strategies around transforming your relationship with food in your body. And these strategies you're going to be able to implement right away. So I'm going to ask you to stay on till the end to get these strategies. And I'm also going to give you the opportunity to take up some free coaching with me. There'll be a limited number of spots for that. So make sure that you stay on until the end. And that, I think, is all the technical stuff at the moment. Does anybody have any questions before we start? And if you do, just pop it up in the chat box or press *9 on your keypad. Anyone? Okay, I can't see anything coming up. Nancy has asked, may she record this session? Yes, you may. That's fine. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you. And when I share my screen with you, it'll just show, you'll see everybody else's names, but you'll see a PowerPoint presentation come up with some slides. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that because some people learn visually. So you'll see the PowerPoint. There will be times when we get back to question time where I will unshare the screen, and we'll go back to you seeing me talk. And we'll sort of flick between the two. All right, somebody's raised their hand. So whoever's raised their hand, ending in digits 4942, I'm just going to unmute you now. Go ahead, who's that?
Oh, hi, Louise, it's Claire here. I'm sorry, I'm a bit technologically challenged here. I'm on my phone, but I would like to access it on my computer. And I'm just wondering which is the link.
Did you, when you received the email to register and in the confirmation emails, did you, you would have seen that, scroll down, there was a unique link that said to click from PC, Mac, Linux, or Android. If you click on that, then you can actually see the screen on your computer. What I will ask you to do though is to, once you've brought that up and you are on your computer, just disconnect the meeting from your phone, because otherwise you'll get feedback on the line and you won't be able to hear. Okay. Is that all right?
Okay, lovely. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt. Okay.
Not at all. No worries. All right. I'm just checking if anybody else has got any questions. Evelyn's asked, is your approach mindful eating? Yes, there is some mindful eating within here. It's one of the aspects of what we do. But we're going to talk about that later, Evelyn. I will make sure that we get to talk more about mindful eating if that's what you would like to do. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I can't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, which means that will bring up the PowerPoint. All right, hold on a sec. There we go. All right, I'm hoping you can all see that now. Okay, so welcome to this webinar, 5 Keys to Transform Your Relationship with Food and Your Body. What are you going to learn today? So what you're going to learn today is we've broken up the content into 4 sections. The first section, we're going to talk about the dieting myth. We're then going to talk about stress and its impact on metabolism and weight. When we move into section 3, we're going to talk about compulsive eating, and I'm going to give you some strategies and a deeper understanding of compulsive eating. And then our last section, we're going to go into 5 strategies or 5 keys to start transforming your relationship with food and with your body. So what I'm going to share with you today is why dieting doesn't work. I'm going to talk to you about willpower and what the truth is about willpower. What I'm going to share with you as well is what really causes us to put on weight. And we're then going to look at compulsive eating, as I said, and I'm going to give you one way to really start overcoming compulsive eating. When we get into the strategies, what I will be sharing with you is how to stop eating when you've had enough, how to start creating healthier eating patterns, and how to work with your body rather than against it. During our call today, we're also going to hear from the fabulous Naomi Harris. Now, Naomi is an Australian. She's a naturopath, and she is from Melbourne, and she's going to be talking to us about the power of loving your body now. Okay, so many of you are here today because you struggle with food and or your weight. And I know from my many years of struggling with eating and weight myself that you may also be struggling with a number of things. Trying to lose or maintain weight would probably be one of them. Feeling like you're confused about all the diets that are out there and not knowing what to eat, how to eat, when to eat. So many confusing messages. You've probably tried a multitude of diets, and many, many diets, and found that you have little or no sustainable results. You may feel out of control with food. You may even be somebody who struggles with binge eating, overeating, or emotional eating, and you're not quite sure exactly how to tackle that or how to overcome it. And you probably find, or you may find, that you dislike your body and that you feel frustrated with not being able to really recognize your hunger and your fullness signals. And so what I want you to know is that you're not alone. The research statistics on dieting and eating issues are astounding. Now, the Australian government did some research recently over the last few years into the obesity epidemic in Australia. And what they came out with were some very, very frightening statistics. What we know from this research is that at any given time in Australia, 60% of women are on a diet or eating plan. And of these women, 90% admit that they are compulsive eaters, so overeaters, emotional eaters, or binge eaters. So what this essentially means is that more than half of the female population in Australia struggles with their eating and with their body. One of the other statistics that we know, which is absolutely astounding, is that 87% of women say that they don't like their bodies. Now, these statistics to me were absolutely frightening when I saw them. And one of the things that we know, and I'm sure you'll recognize this for yourself, is that there is deep shame and guilt when it comes to eating in our bodies. But I really want you to know that you're not alone. Even though you may feel isolated, you may feel alone in this problem, you're absolutely not. So I wanted to share with you my story. I grew up in South Africa. I am one of 4 children, and I come from a family where there was a lot of love, a very loud and vivacious, dynamic family. My father in particular was larger than life and always the life and soul of the party. And one of the things that we, unfortunately, in my family didn't do very well was we didn't do the uncomfortable emotions very well. We did the happy emotions, the happiness, the joy, the fun. But when it came to the sadness, the anxiety, the disappointment, my mum and dad found it very, very hard to express those kinds of feelings. And so I remember as a young girl, one of my earliest and vivid memories was coming home from school one day, having had a really bad day with a particular bunch of girls, going to my mum's pantry and taking out a packet of biscuits, jumping into my bed, crawling under the doona, and just eating the whole packet of biscuits and feeling better. And so my emotional eating was never really a problem for me until you fast forward about sort of 15 or 20 years. And I continued, particularly actually, before I fast forward, 20 years or so, I reached my teens, and I was about at age sort of 16 that we went away on a holiday with my mum and dad. And there were a whole lot of teenagers there. And there was one boy in particular who I was absolutely mad about. And one day we were all lying by the pool, sunbaking, and I was lying in my bikini, as you do. And there was a couple of girls who took it upon themselves to make a comment in front of everybody who was there. And they said that they didn't think that I should be in a bikini because of the size of my thighs and my butt. And I remember feeling like I just wished that the ground would swallow me up and take me away. And it was actually at that point that I remember thinking to myself that I would never allow my body to let me down again. And it was then that I waged war on my body and I started dieting. And so I went on the dieting roller coaster, and I started dieting at the age of 16, and I yo-yo dieted all the way through my 20s and into my 30s. And all of my friends knew me as someone who was either completely on a diet or absolutely off one. So I was either completely obsessing and restricting and focusing on food and exercising excessively, or I was binge eating. Now, the thing was, is that nobody knew I was a binge eater. I had such deep shame around this topic, such deep shame. And I remember thinking in my early 30s, there's got to be a way. There has to be a way to let this go, this obsession around food. And so I started researching, and I researched and I researched and I researched all the experts. And one day I happened upon the teachings of a guy called Mark David at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. And what I learned through his teachings was that I'm not broken, so I don't need to be fixed. I learned that my eating issues were not the problem, and that my body and my weight was not the issue, that these were just expressions of a deeper disharmony. And once I was able to understand what that deeper disharmony was, I was able to heal my relationship with food. And so I went on to study eating psychology. And it was through my study of eating psychology that I came to be where I am today, which is sharing all of this amazing and incredible information with you. So I really want to ask you now, what does dieting mean to you? And what I would love is for you to be able to, I'm going to unshare my screen, but what I would love is for you to share with us, either in the chat box or if you'd like to raise your hand, just a word or a couple of words about what dieting actually means to you. What is it that dieting means to you? Just a word, a couple of words. Measured. Annette says measured, absolutely. Here we go. Someone else has come up with restriction. Evelyn says deprivation. Claire says stress. Deprivation again. Here we go. Yeah. More restriction, deprivation. Sure. Self-punishment. Yeah. So now so many of my clients come to me and they come with words like tired, cranky, boring, afraid, panicked, regimented. And sometimes they say things like reward, hope, respect, receiving respect, frustration, planning. So many words that actually describe dieting. And some of these words are positive, but what we'll mostly find is that for a lot of us, and Nancy says confusing, absolutely, it's incredibly confusing. It's really, really confusing, and it's quite frustrating because we may feel like we're making headway, but then we end up getting stuck. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you again. All righty, here we go. Okay, let's just move this across. Okay, all right, so I'm hoping you can all see my screen again. So what are the mainstream beliefs about weight loss? So the mainstream beliefs about dieting and weight loss are that calories in versus calories out is the only way to lose weight. That it's all about how much energy we expend versus how much fuel we put in our bodies. It's all about exercise, and it's all about willpower, and it's all about fighting with our bodies. So what if I told you that none of these were 100% accurate, and that in fact, none of them has ever been proven to be true? So we're going to talk about the truth about dieting. Okay, so dieting myth number one is that calories in versus calories out equals weight loss. And what I'd like you to understand is that this is a completely outdated approach to weight loss. What we know from research that has been conducted over and over again is that 99% of people who go on a diet gain the weight that they lost and more. 99%, which essentially means that dieting is only working for 1% of the population. And what I will also tell you is that there's no accepted clinical research to support long-term dieting as a weight loss strategy. In fact, a study was done about 10 or 15 years ago where they tracked 20,000 women over an 8-year period. And they divided them into two groups. They divided them into a group that had never dieted before and that were generally easily able to maintain their weight and that they were intuitive or natural eaters. And then they had another group who were the control group, which were the dieters. And these dieters were obviously people who had been dieting for quite some time and were continuing to diet. And what they found was when they tracked these women over 8 years was that at the end of the 8 years, the women who had been dieting had all gained more than 20% as an overall, 20% more weight than those that hadn't been dieting. Now that is really, really significant. So the truth is, restricting calories has long-term negative effects, okay? Long-term negative effects on the body. What it does is it increases our cortisol levels, so our stress hormone levels. It desensitizes us to pleasure. It creates nutrient deprivation, and it fuels perfectionism. Now, in the Western world, perfectionism is one of those words that has negative context, but a lot of positive as well. But what I will tell you is that always around the corner from perfectionism is self-abuse. The other things that dieting causes, chronic dieting causes, is things like fatigue, poor digestion, low mood, immune problems, headaches, constipation, binge eating, an inability to lose weight, stress chemistry, and essential fatty acids and protein deficiency. Okay, dieting myth number 2, that exercise is the royal road to weight loss. The truth about this is that exercise does not guarantee you significant weight loss. Now, whilst we know that exercise reduces stress and it improves our long-term health, this is regardless of our weight, okay? So what we really know about exercise is that losing weight is about so much more than just exercise. It's about so much more than that. There was a very interesting study, again, done in the US, and it showed when they tracked people who were on the same diet, they put them on the same diet in a clinical setting over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, that there was only a 1.4 kilogram difference in the average weight between the exercisers and the non-exercisers, which they didn't feel was particularly significant. Okay, so moving on to our last myth, dieting myth number 3. That losing weight is all about how much willpower and discipline we have. So let's talk about willpower. Okay, so cookies and radishes. Some really interesting research was done around willpower, and this is probably the most significant study. You may have even heard of it before. It's called the Cookies and Radishes Study. And this Cookies and Radishes Study was done where a whole lot of people were invited to come hungry to the study and spend a good few hours there. And when they arrived, they were divided into 2 groups. And the one group, well, as they arrived, first of all, they could actually smell beautifully baked chocolate chip cookies coming out of the kitchen, and they could have this amazing smell. And as they arrived, they were either told to go to a table where they could help themselves to the chocolate chip cookies, or the other group wasn't allowed to go to the chocolate chip cookies. They had to go and eat the bowl of radishes on the other table. And once they had allowed them to satisfy themselves with the cookies or the radishes, they then took this group of people and got them to sit down individually and do a geometric puzzle that was particularly challenging. And what they found was that those who had to resist the cookies and just eat the radishes had far less staying power and determination in finishing the geometric puzzle. And they felt that this was really significant. And what it showed us was that willpower is like a battery pack. And what we know from this study and from various other studies is that when we have to resist, when we have to say no, when we have to use our willpower or our control against something, and it doesn't just have to be food, when we have to discipline ourselves, it actually depletes our willpower. So it's almost like when we wake up in the morning, we feel strong. And I'm sure a lot of you will have experienced that, where you wake up in the morning, you're like, today I'm going to eat really well, I'm going to focus on my food. But as the day goes on and as you resist, you notice that your battery pack of willpower is starting to get depleted. Okay. So we know that willpower is affected by suppression of cravings, thoughts, and feelings. It's also affected by low blood sugar. So when your blood sugar drops, we know that your willpower drops. We also know that when you're focused on maintaining relationships, when you're having to maintain particularly difficult relationships, your willpower also drops. So what I really want you to understand is that dieting actually depletes our willpower, and it creates the opposite effect of what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve with dieting is to increase our willpower, when in fact having to say no and restrict ourselves all the time actually depletes our willpower. Now, this is a very, very interesting concept. And in eating psychology, we talk about stabilizing eating patterns. One of the things that I'm most focused on when people come into my program or into my groups is to help them to reach a state of natural eating, or what we call, some people call it intuitive eating. I like to call it natural eating. Now, natural eating is the kind of state that you were when you were a baby, the kind of state you were in when you were a baby. When your mother fed you, you were hungry and you ate, and then when you were satisfied, you stopped. But what we know from studies in eating psychology is that for every diet, there is an equal and opposite binge. So when we start dieting or restricting, and this is in the left-hand quadrant of the 3 quadrants that you're looking at now, or the 3 sections, when we pull the elastic back and we start dieting or restricting, eventually that elastic is going to snap back, and we're going to end up into the other side, which is the overeating, emotional eating, or binge eating. Now, this may happen. You may be able to diet or restrict for a few months, especially when you first start dieting, and then eventually we'll have a snap back to the overeating, emotional eating, or binge eating. This is the body's way of nutritionally correcting itself. It's the psyche's way of bringing a snap or a balance bringer to too much control. So what we essentially want to do, and what we aim to do, and what we focus on doing in our groups and in my one-to-one practice, is to get you into that natural eating quadrant in the middle, where you go back to responding to your hunger and fullness, where you go back to being able to be in touch with your body rather than constantly having to exercise control and use restriction and deprivation. Okay, so I'm briefly going to talk to you about the psychology of dieting, because believe it or not, there actually is a psychology to dieting. So there are a few things to be said for the psychology of dieting, and one of them is, I can't be truly loved or happy until I'm thin. And I wonder if any of you have found that this resonates with you, where you feel like there's a part of you that is going to start living your life when you actually lose weight and when you get thin. What I'll say to you about dieting is that it feigns nobility, and it's a silent competitive sport against your body. And what we're saying to ourselves unconsciously is, if I lose weight, I win. And if I lose weight, my body loses. So what I'd like to say to you as well is that it is a parasitic and powerfully successful virus that feeds off fear, and it feeds off our lack of self-worth. I truly believe that if dieting became something of the past, there would be a lot of industries that would go out of business. There would be a lot of money that would not be made. Dieting is huge business. It's big industry, not just in Australia, but throughout the world. And it's one of those things that it feeds off. They use the media to feed off our fear and our lack of self-worth. For me, dieting is the ultimate act of disembodiment. And what do I mean by disembodiment? I mean, when we use the mind and the external cues to make decisions for our body, rather than our hunger and our fullness, rather than asking our body what it is that it would actually like to eat, rather than connecting with the body and really listening. That to me is disembodiment. So when we use external cues to decide what to eat, how to eat, when to stop, this is what we call disembodiment. And that's what dieting is. I will say to you that this sort of approach will never result for you in sustainable weight loss. As much as you want to try and diet over and over and over again, and many of us, I'm sure on this call, have tried, this sort of approach unfortunately never results in sustainable weight loss. So we have a saying in eating psychology, which is, to lose weight, you first have to own it. And by this I mean, imagine if you have a car, and that car needs to go somewhere, and you really want to get to your destination. What do you have to do to get to your destination? You have to get in your car and you have to drive it. It's the same with your body. For you to be at your ideal weight, for you to reach your natural set point, you need to be in your body. You need to get back in your body and experience embodiment. So it's at this point that I'm going to introduce to you Naomi Harris, the wonderful Naomi Harris. Now, Naomi, as I mentioned to you, she is a naturopath and a body love expert who runs a practice in Melbourne. And she also runs women's groups where she supports women to reconnect with their femininity on a deep and empowering level. She is deeply passionate about helping women to love their bodies and come back to themselves and to experience the true essence of who they are. Now, Naomi has a decade of naturopathic experience, and she has her own beautiful story of how she came to love her body, which she's going to share with you. So I am going to just unshare my screen again, if you give me a sec, and I will then introduce Naomi to you. So hold on a sec. Just go back to Zoom. Oh dear, what's happening here? Hold on, everybody. Sorry, for some reason it's not. There we go. Stop share. All right. I'm going to mute myself, Naomi, and I'm going to unmute you. And
there I am. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Lou. I'm really excited that you paused at that point, Lou, with the car, with driving your own vehicle, your own body vehicle, because that's exactly where my passion is and the work that I do. So just a quick introduction to me. As Lou mentioned, I'm a naturopath and I have been practicing for about a decade. And my whole exploration of the need for us to drive our own cars, to use your metaphor, is that I realized doing the naturopathic work that there were pieces that were missing. And the pieces that were missing for me was that there wasn't a really deep exploration of that. The relationship that we have with food is actually the relationship that we have with ourselves and our own body, and how much of an impact that has on anything that you may go and see a health professional about. That until you're driving your own car and you're actually owning your own body and your own symptoms and everything that's going on, that the really deep healing, the profound healing, it's harder to come by. My exploration into this whole arena of food and of body love is because, like Lou's story, I have a story of disordered eating and really, really disordered relationship with my own body. I also went down the binge eating and the self-punishment cycle, and probably about the same time frames as you, Lou. I was about early mid-30s when I went, okay, this has really got to stop now, because there's got to be more to life than this constant feeling that I have of, for me, it was self-hatred and self-punishment, and just knowing that there was something wrong and that there was the potential for something better, but not really being aware of how to get there. So I went on a bit of a quest as well, and I started to do my own research and my own study. And it's culminated in this really strong belief that I have, and that underpins everything that I do, is that every single one of us on this planet has the right to love ourselves exactly as we are. There is no need for change. There's no need for the weight loss or for the medical procedures or for the different hair or the different clothes. Exactly as we are, we have the right to love ourselves. And as Lou mentioned, we're constantly taught that that's not true. They use fear, they use shame. They're constantly, the messaging is bombarding us that this is not our right. This is not true for us. Oh, and there's a picture of me dancing in the forest, which is how I feel most of the time now that I have come back into my body and in love with my own body. So thank you so much for the invitation to have a quick chat, Lou. And we talked about what I would bring to you today, and I really wanted to bring the piece of what is the cost of not loving our bodies. And what's the power that comes from this kind of experience, like me dancing in the forest, when it translates into every part of our lives? So let's start with the cost. What is the cost? So Lou's touched on it a bit in terms of dieting and in terms of, that I can't truly be loved until I'm thin, because I have no worth until I'm thin. And the way that we think about our bodies is the way that we think about ourselves, because there is no separation of us from our bodies. So if we take that, just think about the last few thoughts that you might have had about your body when you looked in the mirror this morning, or when you caught that glimpse of yourself in the street window, or when you compared yourself to that picture that you saw in a magazine or on social media. If you're not celebrating your own body, you're not celebrating yourself. And that takes a massive amount of energy, and it takes a massive amount of time in our day. If you really consider how much time you spend thinking about your body in ways that aren't positive, that is an awful lot of time that could be utilized for creation and for joy. And as women, we have this strange idea that change comes about through negative reinforcement. If I give myself a hard enough time often enough, that's going to create change. But it doesn't work. Change comes through love, and change comes through acceptance and through gratitude. That's where the really deep change comes from. But we get so stuck in this judgment and in this talking to ourselves in ways that we would never consider talking to anybody else. So the cost of not loving our bodies is that it spills out into every aspect of our lives. If we are driving a car, if our vehicle is one that is being viewed with dislike or with hatred or with contempt or with this constant judgment and need for change, that's going to translate into all of the experiences that we have in life. And Lou also mentioned the disembodiment that comes from dieting, our loss of self that comes from the restriction of the food goes in. That disembodiment also travels over into our experience of ourselves. And by not loving our bodies, the really big cost is that we actually have loss of life. And I don't mean death. I mean, we're alive, but we're not alive. We don't have the truly deep aliveness that comes from being in our bodies and experiencing life through these amazing vehicles that deserve to be celebrated no matter what they look like right in this moment. And this is actually the power that comes from loving the body that we do have. It's that every moment of life is rich, and every moment of life is worth living. So let's contemplate for a moment a piece of broccoli. And it's a well-cooked piece of broccoli. It's cooked however you like it. And if you don't like broccoli, replace it with whatever you do like to eat. And when we're disembodied and when we're not in our bodies and in our body experience, we put the broccoli in our mouth, we chew it, we swallow it, and we're on our way. There may be judgment around the fact that we're eating. There may be that concern that, oh my God, I'm going to get fat with, or whatever it is that our story is playing out with this broccoli and with this food that's going in. But imagine that you're in your body and you're driving your car, and that every moment of your life is a celebration. So you put the broccoli in your mouth, and the broccoli has a texture, and it has a flavor, and it has a warmth if it's warm, or it has a coolness if it's a salad. And you chew it, and your body is involved in the entire process. And you swallow it down into your belly, and your mind is involved in the process, because the broccoli becomes a celebration of who you are and your body, and that extends out into your entire life. So that your life becomes moments like me dancing in the forest. But it's the simple things like the eating of the broccoli that brings that joy back. And so there is pleasure. And there's pleasure in every moment. And we don't have to restrict our pleasure to those times that we think we're allowed to have pleasure. Our entire life becomes one of pleasure. And I know that the work that Lou does with normalizing eating and finding that space where food is a wonderful part of your life, and that pleasure is a really large part of that, because dieting and this disassociation from our body absolutely restricts the amount of pleasure that we feel in our lives. Our bodies is a vehicle for us. It's our own little piece of physical universe that we've been granted, and we can't put our arms around someone we love and hug them without our body. And we can't smell the smell of a newborn head, or we can't make love, or we can't experience the wind in our hair without our body. And yet we think that we can disassociate from that body and not respect and love and have deep gratitude for her and still experience those experiences. But they're a shallow experience of the potential of what there is when we're deeply in love with our own bodies. And that's where our power comes from. So Lou's invited me to provide you with just a little experience of what this could be like. And I thought I would run you through a very quick process. It's very easy to do. It's easier the first few times to do with your eyes closed, just so you can focus in. I did it on the train this morning with my eyes open because I'm used to it, and it can be done in public. It can be done when you're feeling like you've just caught yourself in that moment of giving your body a really hard time, or you're feeling that you just need a little bit more support. You need a little bit more of your personal power to get through the experience that you're having. So I'm going to give you all an invitation now to close your eyes if you wish to. And to rest one hand over your heart, which is just sort of in the center of your chest, a little bit to the left. And to rest one hand over your belly, over your lower belly. And we're just going to take a moment to breathe in, just breathing into our bodies. So for those of you that haven't experienced a meditation of the breath before, it's just simply breathing in and noticing that your breath is flowing in and filling up your lungs. And it's flowing out again. And it's flowing in. And it's flowing out. And as you continue to breathe, I'm going to invite you to bring your awareness down to where your hand is resting over your heart. And as you breathe, imagine that you're smiling into your heart. Imagine that you are relaxing your chest and your shoulders so that your heart can take up more room in your chest. And as you smile into her, she fills with love because she's being noticed, and we all love to be noticed. Our heart is no different. So smile and breathe that love into your heart. And breathe and smile and just feel her filling with love. Feel her relaxing and expanding with all the love that she can feel. And now as you continue to breathe, I'm going to invite you to bring both hands to, I'll suggest, your muffin top as a place. If you love that part of your body, maybe choose a part of your body that you don't love. But if that area of your body is one that you've ever spoken badly to or thought badly at, place both hands, one on either side of that area. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to actually just place one hand. Let's go with the left hand. And just relax your right hand down. And now as you continue to breathe, imagine that all that love that you started to feel in your heart and that expansion and that smile that's in your heart is being breathed down to your hand where it's resting. So that as you inhale, you're sending all of that love down to your hand, and your hand is passing it through into that area above your hip. Continuing to breathe and to direct that love of your heart down into that area. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and actually check in to the both sides of your body. Check into the side that had the hand resting over it and that was receiving the love. and the side that wasn't receiving the love and was just being. And I would really love to hear, maybe in the chat box, Lou, if we have just a minute, did anybody notice any changes in that area of their body from consciously sending love down into their bodies? Consciously feeling the love of an area of your body and loving that area yourself. So from Nancy, we have more light. Thank you, Nancy. More warmth from Anna. Thank you, Anna. Did anybody else notice any difference? I notice also light and warmth, but there's a sense of aliveness that I feel in that area when I do a practice like this. And it's a simple practice. It can be done in 2 minutes of just noticing your heart, feeling the love and gratitude for yourself, and then choosing a part of your body that doesn't receive love and gratitude from you, and then doing both sides of your body, obviously, because we don't want to miss out one side. And I really encourage that as just a way to start connecting deeply into your body and into loving the car that you're driving through this life. Thank you, Lou.
All right. Thank you, Naomi, so much, love, for that beautiful, beautiful words and just that beautiful experience. I absolutely loved so much what you said earlier about that not being in your body is a loss of life. You know, it's not a death in any way. It's just it's a loss of life experience. And I'm sure, and I mean, I hear this from people all the time, but I'm sure many of you on the call today have experienced that feeling of, you know, if I could only lose weight, then I will do X, Y, Z. If I was only thin, I would do X, Y, Z. I might buy those clothes, or I might enter into that relationship, or I might go out and do that X, Y, Z. You know, we're losing our life when we're not in our bodies, when we're not experiencing our bodies. And the way that you described that broccoli and that experience with the broccoli is just so beautiful. The simple things and the joy, that's pure embodiment. That's really where I believe that we are, what we're born to do and what we're born to experience. And so thank you for that, Naomi. That was just a really, really beautiful way to describe it, and a beautiful experience in terms of the somatic practice. Naomi, would you like to talk then just about the free gift that you have to give away today?
I'd love to. Thank you, Lou. So when Lou does an email following this call, I have asked her to share an ebook that I've written on radiant self-love. And it's a step-by-step guide to falling in love with yourself. And there's 5 steps in there that are followed. And there's a little bit of self-reflection to do as well. And it's a really beautiful, powerful process. So I'm really grateful to Lou that she'll be sharing that one with you as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Lou.
Here's here is, if you want to write this down, if you can, the web address is up on the screen now. You should be able to see it. Can you see it, Naomi?
Yes, I can.
Okay. But I will be sending this out in an email to all of you after this masterclass. So don't worry if you don't get this written down today. That's no problem at all. Okay, so what I would like to do now, I'm going to just stop this share for a moment. And what I'd like to do now is just give everybody the opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. So if you would like to pop anything up into the chat box to me privately, or if you'd like to raise your hand, and I'll just check down to see if anybody's got their hand raised at the moment. Nobody has. Okay, so any questions at all? Let me go further down and see if there are any questions. Okay. So Nancy says, does eating psychology have links with TCM, traditional Chinese medicine? It sounds like it. Nancy, the answer, and it's an interesting one because I'm actually a practitioner of Chinese medicine myself. The answer is yes, it does. We don't actually necessarily quote traditional Chinese medicine in eating psychology, but a lot of the concepts around mindfulness and being in the body and constitutional types and really listening to your body depending on what is good and helpful for your body, absolutely. So there are links with traditional Chinese medicine in that sense. And I love to draw parallels between TCM and eating psychology. In fact, some of the exercises that I do in the group program, we actually spend a whole session doing a constitutional diagnosis with everybody. We look at tongues, we feel pulses, we take a little bit of a deep dive, and we give everybody the chance to really understand what their constitutional type is, and what foods in particular and lifestyle choices might be helpful for that. So I hope that answers your question, Nancy. Thank you for that. So Evelyn says, I find that when I'm in my right size body that I feel more alive and I'm able to consciously inhabit my body. And I think that that's different from Naomi Harris's approach. So I wonder, Naomi, do you want to answer that question, love? And you probably can't see it, so I'll read it again. If you're able to unmute yourself. Evelyn says, I find that when I'm in my right size body, that I feel more alive and I'm able to consciously inhabit my body. I think that she's saying that that's different from your approach and perhaps wants to know if it is.
It does sound slightly different. Evelyn, the tricky part about that approach and the part that often women stumble with is that the idea of a right size is one that is often not coming from inside of us. It's coming from an external teaching of the way that we should look. And that often starts from birth, that we have all of this messaging coming in about what our rightness needs to look like. I do understand what you're saying, that there is often a point in our physical body where we feel well and we feel healthy, and that does feel right, and that you're more able to be inside. But I also feel that often with that idea of rightness, like you've ticked the correct box, it's like you're allowing yourself to not give yourself such a hard time for that time while you're at your correct size, your right size. And if we can find in ourselves that we don't have to give ourselves a hard time no matter what size we are, life is so much freer, and our body is able to be so much more healthy and so much more intuitively where it needs to be, without that mind pressure coming in of saying this is what you need to be and this is where you need to be. And I'm absolutely not disregarding your experience if that's what you found. I've just found that for a lot of women it gets caught up in the idea of what is correct rather than what their body is actually saying to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would reiterate what Naomi is saying and say that what we would love to help you to do is to get to a point where you can feel like you're in your right body no matter what your size is. We want to help you to be in that. And like Naomi says, we don't always want to use the word right. For me, it's more about what is your natural set point, what is your natural weight? Where does your body feel safe? Where does your body feel comfortable? And we may have a different idea to what that is. We may think that that's 62 kilos when in fact your body thinks it's more like 65 or 68. That's a very interesting concept. And we talk about that a lot kind of as we go along. So I hope that answers your question. Anna Lula, if am pronouncing it correctly, said, what if you know something is bad for you, but you really want to indulge in it? Is that binge eating? Or is it better to just not give yourself a hard time about it and have it? I hate restricting myself, but sometimes I know something is not good for me either. Now, Anna Lula, what I'm going to say to you is that later on, we're going to talk about compulsive eating, and I'm going to share with you, a couple of strategies around that. But what I will say to you is that what I teach in my groups is that real difference between knowing when you have something that is truly what your body needs, or knowing when it's coming from a different space, like an emotion, or it's being driven by something else. It's, it's a physical craving. So we spend some time sort of differentiating between the two. And I would say that giving yourself a hard time about it is never, ever going to be helpful, no matter what you do. Okay, it's never going to be helpful to give yourself a hard time. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is to come back to conscious awareness. If you're finding that you really want something, but you know that it's not helpful, and I don't like to use the word bad, because when we use the word bad as human beings, we consider ourselves to be bad. So I take the word bad out and I say, it might not be helpful for your body to eat that piece of chocolate cake. But if you're going to do it anyway, bring yourself back to conscious awareness, slow it down, okay, and bring everything back, eat it with purely mindful eating. And what you'll find is when you do that, when you make the conscious choice to eat it, rather than try and resist all the way, and you eat really slowly and you give your body what it needs, which is perhaps it needs the pleasure, or perhaps it needs sugar because it's exhausted. If you give it that little bit, then your body will go, oh, okay, I'm getting what I need, and you won't need to eat the whole piece of chocolate cake. But it's when we go into that absolutely unconscious space of binging and being in an unconscious state, because binging, just so you know, is industrial strength overeating. It means that we're in an unconscious state, we're shoveling it in food, and we're not even tasting it, we're just shoveling it in. So it's not binging if you bring it back to consciousness. So I really hope that is helpful, and that helps for you to differentiate between whether it's binging or just a little bit of indulgence. Okay, and Beth asks, are there no good diets or ways of eating that can help someone like me become healthier, which my doctor says means I must be lighter? Okay, so this is an interesting one. I have a lot of clients who come in and say, okay, I get what you're saying. I get the concepts around we don't want to be using diets to lose weight. It's not helpful. It's not healthy to be dieting. It's not healthy for my mindset or my body. But my doctor has told me that I absolutely have to lose weight for my health. Now, sometimes that is true, but a lot of the time we come in with this fear mentality around BMI. And some of us are not actually all that big, okay? Or we might be bigger than the average size, and we're told that our BMI is too high, that we're obese, and I absolutely hate that word. And so we're told that we have to lose weight. Now, I would suggest that if that is you, and you're feeling like you're just that bit bigger, and your BMI, you were told that your BMI is too high, you should be reading a book called Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon. It's an absolutely fascinating book which refutes a lot of the stuff that's pushed on us by doctors and says you absolutely have to be this size because it's a health risk. Okay, not a lot of it is not true. However, if you are told by your doctor, and there are some things that we know, as an example, when people get a lot bigger, they are more susceptible to things like diabetes, inflammation, potentially cancers, etc., as they get a lot bigger, or heart disease, cardiovascular disease. The way that I work in my practice is to say that we have to get you to a state of natural eating first. And then I'm absolutely happy to bring in some structure around doing what we call a nutritional approach to medicinal eating, which is where we've reached a point where you can say, okay, you've reached a state of natural eating, you're much more intuitive with your body. Let's start taking out certain foods to try and help you and help your body to reduce the inflammation, to drop the weight more easily so that you can become more healthy, if we're absolutely sure that it is a health problem. So I hope, Beth, that answers your question around, and just to come back to it, again, I don't want to use the word good and bad around diets. It's very confusing for a lot of us, but people come to me often and they say, well, what about paleo? Or what about 5-2? Or what do you think about this diet? And I'll say, well, what does your body say? Have you tried paleo? And if they say yes, I say, well, how does your body feel? If you eat paleo, does your body feel good? Do you feel good? Do you lose weight? Is it sustainable? And so it depends on your body. There's no good and bad diet. There's only a diet that works for you, okay? So if you have a dieting mentality, in other words, you've been used to restriction and deprivation, what you'll probably find is no matter what diet you try, you're going to end up binging. So we have to help you to get to a point of natural eating and then look for a nutritional structural eating plan that works for you. Okay, I hope that that helps. I'm going to take one more question from Nancy, and then we need to make sure that we move on, and I'll try and answer the questions at the end. So Nancy says, during my college years, I was thinking about losing weight because I thought it was good for my health. At that time, I was following a course in homeopathy, and the teacher asked me 3 times if I was sure. After the 3rd question, I realized I liked food that much. I did not want to lose weight. Only after that consciousness, I started to lose weight. Before it was difficult. Is there a relevance with accepting yourself? Yes, absolutely, Nancy. This is one of the things that we work on quite a lot again in the groups, which is really beginning to understand, for a lot of us, there is a benefit to being bigger. So some of us may not actually understand that being bigger is actually, your body feels safe at a bigger size. It feels safer. But also that you say you want to lose weight on a conscious level, but on an unconscious one, you actually don't. Yeah. So if I'm understanding it right, is that you're saying that you realize that you liked food that much that you actually liked it more than losing weight. So enjoying food was more important to you than losing weight. So yes, there's definitely a relevance with accepting yourself and saying, oh, wow, okay, so I accept this as part of me and I can relax into it. And when I start to relax into that reality of what the truth is, then I can lose weight naturally. So I hope that is what you were describing. All right. So we're going to continue on now and move into section 2. I'm just going to share my screen with you again. Here we go. All right. Fantastic. Okay, good. So we're going to talk now about stress and its impact on our metabolism and its impact on our relationship with food. So what I really want to get across to you this morning is that chronic stress is the enemy of weight loss. It's the absolute enemy of anybody trying to lose weight. Anyone who's in chronic stress is going to find it incredibly hard, if not impossible, to lose weight. Now, why is this the case? Well, if you think about it like this, imagine if you were being chased by a tiger. I know it's unlikely to happen in this day and age, but say you were being chased by a tiger. And if you think about what would be happening in your body when you're being chased by a tiger, you'd be wanting to run away. So the way that the body works is that what it would do, it would route blood away from the non-essential functions like digestion and any of the kind of middle functions down, sending blood to our limbs, to our hands and to our feet and to our brain for quick thinking. So when we're in the stress response, straight away our adrenaline goes up, okay? And that is what we call acute stress. Now, when we get to chronic stress, we also add cortisol into the mix. Now, most of us are in chronic stress whether or not we know it. Now, a lot of us may not feel stressed, but we've actually got high levels of cortisol circulating through our system. So when we're in chronic stress, these kinds of things are happening. We have, in survival mode or stress mode, decreased nutrient absorption. We have decreased thermic efficiency, decreased growth hormone, decreased thyroid hormone, and decreased gastric emptying time, which is obviously to do with digestion. We also have increased insulin resistance, increased inflammation, and we also have an increase in nutrient excretion and deficiencies. In other words, the body stops absorbing nutrients. And then what happens in the opposite to that, which is when we're in the relaxation response, is that we have a completely opposite picture. Insulin output actually decreases. And what this does is that it signals the body to start burning or releasing stored fat. We also have an increase in thyroid hormone and an increase in metabolic activity. And along with this, an increase in gut flora population. So what does this mean, in essence? What does all of this mean? It means that stress is equal to digestive and metabolic shutdown, where the body stores fat. And on the other side, when we're relaxed, relaxation equals digestive and metabolic optimization, where the body starts to burn fat for energy. Now, I love hearing this. I've heard it so many times. my groups or in my practice, where people come in and they say, when we go through this concept around stress and its impact on metabolism, and people come back and go, I went on holiday and I relaxed and I ate what I wanted and I lost weight. I came back 2 or 3 kilos lighter. And I always laugh and say, well, it's a no-brainer if you think about it. Your cortisol levels have dropped. You've gone into the relaxation response. Your digestion is suddenly increasing and it's optimized and your metabolism is increased and your body's starting to burn fat. It feels safe enough to burn fat. So I want you to just imagine now that you were living in Northern Europe approximately 2,000 years ago. If you're a woman, you are a mother of a couple of children, and your husband is going out, and it's particularly cold and it's snowy, and there's a famine and there's no food, and he's going out to look for food. And some days he comes back with a little bit of food, and at other times he doesn't. And so what happens in your body when you're in this famine is that your body goes into what we call the famine state, which is where it goes into what I call fat lockdown. It's where the body essentially shuts the fat cells down and it stores the fat because it needs that fat for times when you may not have any food. Now, this has happened for the whole of evolution, okay? Now, what's really, really interesting is that the same stress chemistry that goes on when we're in the famine state is the same state. It's very, very similar to the one that we exist in today when we're in chronic stress, okay? When we can't pay the mortgage, or we're late for the meeting, or we're fighting with our family. High levels of cortisol, okay? Chronically high levels of cortisol. Or when we diet, when the body is not sure where its next calories, fat, or protein is going to come from. So this famine state that a lot of us exist in is incredibly unhelpful for anybody trying to lose weight. In fact, it's almost impossible. Now, what actually stresses the body? We always think of stress as one of those things that is essentially just stress at work or stress from relationships, in other words, emotional stress. But what I'd like to put to you today is that there are actually other aspects of our lifestyle that cause cortisol levels to rise. One of them is our diet. So highly processed foods high in sugar. When the body is actually trying to process the food, it finds it incredibly hard and cortisol levels rise. So it actually sees it as a stressor to the body. What else stresses the body? Lack of sleep. What we know from studies is that people who suffer from insomnia have much higher levels of cortisol than those who don't. Hydration. 60% of Australians are chronically dehydrated. So when we are dehydrated, it's very, very difficult for the body to lose weight, just the same as when we are lacking in sleep. Medication and toxins in the body. Now, unfortunately, some medications are out of our control. There's not a lot that we can do. We have to be on certain medications. And some of the toxicity in our environment, it's not that easy to get away from. But what you may or may not know is that toxins are actually stored in the fat cells. So if the body is trying to process toxicity, if it's trying to process toxicity that's coming from medication or food or from the environment, it will do that first before it burns fat. The body has to be free of toxins out of the fat cells before it will start to burn fat. So if you have high levels of toxicity in your body, it's going to be very difficult for your body to burn fat. So the other thing is to be careful of the way that you're talking to yourself. Now, this is a very, very interesting one. All of us have an inner critic. All of us have a little voice that kind of pops us and tells us that we're not good enough, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not good enough at our job, whatever it might be. But what we know about people who are highly critical of themselves is that they also have very high levels of cortisol, very high levels of cortisol. So what we really want for you is to come to a place, and this is one of the modules that I do in my groups, is around self-compassion and teaching you how to let go of the inner critic, how to set boundaries against the inner critic, and to learn how to be compassionate with yourself. Because for me, self-compassion it's something that I've experienced over the years, is a very big part of the puzzle in healing your relationship with food in your body. If you don't have self-compassion, it's very, very difficult to do that and to reach your natural and rightful weight. Okay, so the other thing that stresses the body is our life experiences. I don't know if any of you are aware of the term called emotional obesity. It's something that John Gabriel, who's one of the big voices in intuitive eating and natural weight loss, he talks about emotional obesity as being where our life experiences mold the size that we are. And he shares a beautiful story of a woman that he was working with in his practice who came to him, and they spent quite a few months together focusing on his program, and he wasn't really making any headway in helping her to lose weight. And what he found was that after a couple of months, they started to dive deeper into the more emotional stuff. And he asked her the question, at what point in your life did you start to put on weight? And she said, oh, it was at around age 15. And he asked her what was actually happening at that time. And she said, well, it was actually at a point in my life where I was being abused by my babysitter. And so what would happen was that the babysitter would come around and sexually abuse her when she was 15. And what she came to realize was that because the perpetrator used to tell her that she was beautiful and thin, was that she came to realize that her excess weight was a barrier against any sexual advances from men. And so for many of us, not for all of us, but for some of us and for many of us, our life experiences are those things that create stress in the body. And so the body has a wisdom where it will often do things that we don't necessarily like on a conscious level, but they're there to keep us safe. Okay, so what I would like to do now is I'm going to get you guys to do a little exercise around stress. This is just a very short exercise. It's called the life garden. And what I'd like you to imagine is that you have a garden and it's your life. And in your garden, you have plants and you have weeds. And the plants are those things that are the things in your life that you care about the most, the things that are most meaningful for you. And then you have the weeds in your garden that are those things that stress you out and those things that hold you back from being your best self. And what I would like you to do is to just write down on a piece of paper your top 5 plants. In other words, those things that are most important or significant to you in your life. And then your top 5 weeds. So those things that stress you out or hold you back from being your best self. And I'm just going to give you probably 2 minutes to write that down, and then we'll come back. Okay, I'm just going to give you about 30 more seconds. Okay. So now that you've written down the top 5 plants and the top 5 weeds, what I'd like you to do in your own time, because we're going to run out of time today to do this here, I would really like you to consider this. Where are you able to pull the weeds? And where are you able to nurture and grow the plants? And I'd like you to take some time to consider this, perhaps later on today after the call is finished. Because what we really want for you is to be able to see in your life how much of your stress is within your control and how much is without. Now, there's some things that happen to us in our lives that are out of our control. As an example, we may have to work in a particular career or in a particular environment, or we may not have to. We may have the power to be able to move from that job, or maybe we have financial constraints and we can't. But what I really want you to do is to be able to consider how much of your stress is yours and is there to be changed, or how much of it is not within your control. It's incredibly empowering to be able to come to a level of acceptance and say, I know that that's stressful for me, but I can't do anything about it. Or this is stressful for me, and yes, I absolutely can do something about it. And this is an exercise that, again, that we do in quite a bit of detail, often in one-to-ones, and really spend some time doing the stress assessment and understanding exactly what's going on. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. And I see there's a couple of questions, so I'm just going to answer those. Okay, so Claire has asked, how do you know if you have high levels of toxicity in your body? All right, so this is a tricky one to know whether you have high levels of toxicity. Really, the only way for you to be sure is, well, you can essentially go and get some medical tests done and have a look at your inflammatory markers. And if your inflammatory markers, in other words, your CRP, your reactive proteins, are up over a period of time, you can assume that you have inflammation in your body, which is probably an indication that you're either highly stressed, or that you've got toxicity in your body, or that something else is going on. I mean, there's a number of reasons why that might be happening. If they are able to look at your bloods and outlaw any other medical conditions, then we kind of look at inflammatory markers. But what I would say to you is not to worry too much about knowing whether you have high levels of toxicity in your body, but is to be able to go into your environment and to clear out any toxicity that's within your control. So that might be going into your house and clearing out all of the of any of the products, whether it's your beauty products, your shampoo and conditioner, your cleaning products, clearing them out and replacing them with more natural ones. It might be that you start eating organic food and soaking your vegetables, so that any conventional produce that you might buy, you might get rid of the pesticides on them. It might be that you choose to start eating much more natural foods rather than ones that are highly processed. So if you are doing whatever you can to reduce toxicity without becoming absolutely obsessed by it, you can kind of assume that your toxicity levels are low. And where possible, being able to reduce medication. Okay. All right. So Nancy says, what is your view on the temperature of the food and diet? For example, dairy products is cold and dampness promoting. So Nancy, that's very much about that's a TCM view. That's a traditional Chinese medicine view around temperature of the food and diet. Yes, absolutely. When we do the constitutional assessments that I was talking to you about in the groups that I run, I give, for those that want it, a nutritional assessment which gives you dietary and lifestyle recommendations. And that's absolutely where we talk about things like, you may be somebody who has a lot of dampness in your body, which is a Chinese medicine term. And so we may suggest to you that you might avoid damp-forming foods like dairy, like eating too many cold and raw foods in your diet, as an example. You may want to eat more warming and nourishing foods, stews and soups and winter foods. But that in itself is just one aspect of what I do as part of the program. Okay. And Claire says, mine is all about the thinking. Yeah, I think it is for many of us, Claire. it's when we get to the part on eating, to the section on eating, we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into the mindset. Okay, all right. So let's get moving on then, because I see that we've got about 40 minutes left, and I want to try and make sure that we finish pretty much on time today. Okay. All right, we're going to talk quite quickly, and I want to kind of move through this section fairly quickly, but we're going to talk about set point theory. I wonder if any of you have ever noticed that when you diet, when you finish dieting, you actually put on more weight than when you started. So you may or may not know that all of us as human beings have a set point, which means that we are wired to maintain a healthy weight. So what if you had a fat meter in your body that sent a loud stop to your brain once you'd accumulated enough fat? What if I told you that we all have a fat meter in our bodies and that it's just gone awry? What if our weight regulation system has just gone awry and that we've actually overridden our body's natural programming? So what is the set point? Okay, so 50 years of extensive research has been done into what we call set point theory. And a 1970s study was done, which was really, really interesting, actually. Back in the 1970s, they did this research which showed that the average weight of a 60-year-old man was only 2 kilograms more than the average weight of a 30-year-old man. In other words, the difference in 30 years was only 2 kilograms. Now, I know that they're doing a very similar study they're conducting at the moment, and we're still waiting for the results. But I would imagine that you would understand that those results are going to be completely different. So how do we know that our bodies have a set point? How do we know that our bodies have a weight that they continue to return to? Well, one of the most interesting studies that was done around set point theory was where they took 100 volunteers and put them into a clinical setting. So they took them into a hospital setting and in an inpatient. And over a period of 8 weeks, they got them to all have exactly the same amount of food. So they monitored their food intake, their activity, and their metabolic function. And initially, they asked them to eat. What they did was they gave them 10% more food and calories and continued to give it to them so that they would put on weight. And they asked them to continue to eat until they put on 15% extra body weight. And then what they got them to do was to go the completely opposite and restrict the calories so that they then lost 15% of their body weight. And then what they found was that no matter the starting weight, everybody's metabolism, so their metabolic function, which was measured through blood markers, either increased by 15%, okay, when they gained the weight, or decreased by 15% when they lost the weight. So what this shows us is that the body adjusts itself metabolically when we lose weight or when we put on weight. In other words, the body is constantly monitoring the weight to assess whether or not it feels safe, and it will adjust the metabolism accordingly. So the set point is a homeostatic process. It's one of those processes that you don't have any control over. It's an unconscious process. It's just like when the temperature drops, the hairs rise on our arm. That's an unconscious process. Okay, it's part of what we call the autonomic nervous system. So just like the hypothalamus, which is a little pea-sized thing in our brain, which controls the unconscious processes, just like it controls temperature of the body, it controls our thirst, our sleep, and our emotions. The hypothalamus also controls our hunger through two hormones called ghrelin and leptin. Now, you guys may have heard of ghrelin and leptin before, and I'm going to talk about them in a moment. But all you have to know is that they're the hunger and fullness hormones. So what do we know about the hypothalamus and how it regulates the metabolism and our set point? If we are below our set point, in other words, if we go on a diet and we lose weight and the body feels like it's unsafe, in other words, it's below the set point, it will slow the metabolism, it'll increase our appetite, it will start to push us to crave higher fat foods, and it will reduce motivation to exercise. Now, this action can actually be really strong, and it can create an urge that's way beyond our ability to satisfy the appetite. So it's a really, really interesting thing. This is out of our control. It's absolutely not something that you are conscious of. Now, the interesting thing about the set point is I actually call it a fat thermostat. It's set at the most comfortable point. And it's kind of like a biological force. The further you stray away from the center or from the set point, the stronger the pull is to return you there. So the more weight you lose, the more your body will drop your body temperature and slow your metabolism down. Does that make sense? So that it safeguards against you losing any more weight. So the hormones ghrelin and leptin are really, really interesting. Ghrelin is our hunger hormone, and it's produced by the cells in your gastrointestinal tract. And what it does is that it signals the body to start eating. So it signals the body that it's hungry. Okay. And on the other hand, you've got leptin, which is your fullness hormone, and that's produced by the fat cells. And when the cells in the digestive tract tell the hypothalamus that you've had enough to eat, then leptin will increase. So before eating, your ghrelin is high, which is your hunger hormone, and after eating, your leptin is high. Now, the interesting thing about leptin and ghrelin in the weight gain cycle is that the more weight that we gain, the more resistant to leptin we become. So in other words, the more weight that we gain, the harder it is for us to tell when we are full, because leptin is our fullness hormone. So we develop, as we gain weight, we develop what we call leptin resistance. The signal gets disrupted, and that eventually causes overeating because we don't know when to stop, which is obviously increased calorie intake, moves around again to weight gain. And it's like this vicious cycle that just goes round and round and round. So what I will tell you is that if you've been an overeater or an emotional eater for quite some time, or if you are somebody who has a higher weight, you are more likely to have lower levels of leptin. In other words, you have what we call leptin resistance. And so it's particularly hard for bigger people to lose weight. Now, why am I telling you this? Is because I often get asked these questions, which is, can we find leptin? Can we take some leptin? Or how do we know what our leptin levels are? And unfortunately, leptin, through the studies that they've done on a lot of rats, its main role in humans is actually to protect against weight loss in times of scarcity. It's not something, unfortunately, that we can take. What we know is that on the other side, even though when we gain weight, our leptin levels are lower, but we also know that when our fat stores shrink, we also have decreased leptin production. So our leptin is optimal when we are at our optimal set point. But what I'm going to talk to you about now is how do you help the body to feel safe so that it can actually sit at its ideal set point. So what is the definition of a set point? It's the weight that you keep returning to between diets, that you naturally return to. But there's also something called your natural set point, which is the weight that you maintain when you listen to and respond to your hunger, your fullness, and your body signals. In other words, your natural eating. And it's also the weight that you maintain when you don't fixate on your weight or your food habits. So I'll give you an example. When I was recovering from binge eating and going through my food body transformation, it took me about probably 18 months before my body settled at a weight that was kind of stable. So I kind of put on weight initially, then lost a little bit, then kind of stabilized. And actually my weight has come down slowly over the years and is now sitting at a certain weight. And I can fluctuate up and down by a few kilos, but this is my natural set point. It's not the set point that my body feels that it has to continue to be because I'm dieting anymore. It's the set point that is my natural set point where my body feels safe. So let's talk about the factors that negatively affect your set point. Number one is dieting. Okay, when we diet, the body goes into starvation mode and it holds onto fat. And it continues to push the set point up and up and up and up. So you'll probably notice if you continue to diet, you'll see the set point go up. Binge eating, overeating, and emotional eating absolutely cause our set point to continue to go up, as you can imagine, obviously with the increased calories. Stress, nutritionally barren foods, inflammatory foods, not enough good quality protein, eating too fast, an inadequate eating rhythm, and also inadequate macronutrient balance. All of these factors negatively affect our set point. So the question to ask is really whether you're above or below your set point. Now, it doesn't really matter actually whether or not you're at the moment above or below your set point. I always tell people not to fixate on this, but a lot of people ask this question, and they ask the question in the workshop. So I'm going to go ahead and just share with you what are the I'm just going to pull it up. What are the signs of having a set point that is either above or below where it should naturally be? So just give me a sec. I'm just going to pull this up and stop the share. Hold on a sec. Okay. All right. So if you're above your set point, in other words, above your natural set point, this is going to be some of the signs and symptoms that you would probably experience. Difficulty recognizing your hunger and fullness. Routinely eating beyond fullness. Periods of feeling like you're eating out of control or anticipating your next diet. Skipping meals to lose weight, and then overeating. Eating emotionally. Guilt after eating too much. Overeating, then throwing in the towel and then eating more. Being a fast eater, and fluctuating between being sensible and nutritious and then out of control eating. So those are typically the kinds of characteristics you would see in someone who's above their set point. Now, someone who's below their set point is more likely to be these: preoccupied with food, often feeling hungry, waking up with an overwhelming urge to eat, so often waking up in the middle of the night and just wanting to eat unconsciously. Difficulty sleeping due to gnawing hunger. Often tends to be lower sex drive. Suffering from apathy, fatigue, irritability, or depression. And infrequent or skipped periods, which are non-menopause related. Now, there'll probably be far fewer of us that are below our set point. And some of these, obviously these signs and symptoms can be metabolic or they can be hormonal. So I don't want you to fixate too much on them. But what I often see is people who come in and they've had surgery, they've had weight loss surgery. And what they find is because they're limited in terms of the amount that they can eat, their body is dramatically below their set point. And the body doesn't feel safe. It feels safer at the higher set point, but obviously the body's starting to lose weight because they're not eating as much because they've got a gastric band or they've got a sleeve. And so we notice that they get far more of these below set point things happening. As an example, they may feel very, very cold. And they often wake up at night in an unconscious state, go to the fridge and start eating. Okay, I hope that you found that helpful. I'm going to go back to just have a look at the questions. I saw that there was a question that had come up. Hold on. Okay, so Claire's asked, how do we find our set point? Now, it's unfortunately there's no way to calculate your set point. You can't unfortunately do that. What you can do is for us, it's more important that you don't fixate on your set point, that you understand set point theory, and that you start to get in tune with your body so that you understand where your body feels safe. And what I'm going to share with you right now is some strategies on how to help the body feel safe so that you can move towards your more natural set point. Okay. All righty. Here we go. Okay, so how can we help the body to feel safe? Number one, reduce stress. Okay. Now, if you are someone who's prone to stress, you may want to engage with a therapist to really help you with some stress reducing strategies. It's something that I do a lot particularly in my one-to-one practice. We take a very deep dive into stress, but you really, really need, if you suffer from stress, to get some help with this and to get some help with some stress reduction strategies. Number two, to help the body to feel safe, to reach your natural set point, is to follow mainly an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, what we know is that people who have a higher set point tend to have, more inflammation in their bodies. So coming back to a more anti-inflammatory diet is is really, really helpful for this. Now, I don't necessarily believe in dieting per se, and so I should probably have said here, an anti-inflammatory way of eating. You can go and Google it if you like, but it's very simply eating more whole foods that are, and it's mainly a vegetarian and fish and chicken diet rather than red meat. But it's essentially eating more whole foods and eating more organic foods. Okay, number 3, to help the body to feel safe. And although this may seem like a bit of a no-brainer, staying hydrated and drinking enough water, good quality pure water, is one of the cornerstones of when we start in the groups, the initial stuff that we do. It's if you don't have enough good quality water in your body, if you're not drinking enough water, if you are chronically dehydrated, your cortisol levels are going to be high. And it's going to be very, very difficult for your body to lose weight. So I can't stress enough the importance of making sure that you stay hydrated. Getting enough hours of restful sleep per night. Now, this may be easier said than done, but again, engaging with a practitioner and helping you with sleep hygiene and helping you with strategies around sleep. There's many, many things you can do without taking sleeping tablets to help you have more restful sleep and to help you to have enough. Just remember that if you are not having enough sleep, your cortisol levels are going to be high, and it's going to be very hard for your body to feel safe. Okay, stop calorie counting. As I've said before, calorie counting and restricting calories increases our set point, and it increases our cortisol. And then the last one is to reduce your exposure to toxins, pesticides, and medications where possible. So this comes back, I think it was Claire who said, how do I know how much toxicity I have? If you reduce your exposure as much as you can within your control to toxins, pesticides, and medications, your toxicity levels will be far lower. Okay. And I'm very happy to spend some time chatting to you at a later stage about how to implement this sort of thing into your life. It's really not that hard. Okay, so what have we learned so far? We've learned that dieting causes the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. And that each time we diet, our set point increases as the body tries to keep us safe. We've also learned that stress is a major cause of weight gain, and it creates metabolic and digestive shutdown. We've learned that there are other stresses rather than just emotional stress to the body, and these include the emotions, dehydration, lack of sleep, nutritional deficiency, and environmental toxins. We've also learned that willpower is mostly unconscious, and that it's affected by many things, but 3 of them are blood sugar, emotions, and our mindset. Okay, so what I was going to do was to get you to do a little exercise now, but because we're running out of time and I really want to get into the strategies, we've actually only got about 20 minutes left. I'm not going to do the exercise, but what I would like to do is to just ask you to contemplate now, and you can actually just write it down because we'll just contemplate this for sort of a minute or so. I'd like you to really contemplate what your biggest challenge with food is and what your biggest challenge with your body is. Because for me, if right from the start we get clear, absolutely clear what your challenge with food is and your challenge with your body is, then we can actually see what's standing in your way. And if you struggle with this and you struggle with what the biggest challenge is, particularly with your body or with food, ask yourself, what's my biggest fear if I don't overcome this? In other words, if I don't overcome my eating, my overeating or my emotional eating, what will my life look like in 10 years' time? And am I prepared to wait another 10 years before I actually do something about this? And what I really want you to know is that you don't have to wait, that there are ways for you to transform your relationship with food, for you to help your body to feel safe, for you to be in your body, for you to live life to the fullest like Naomi was describing. You don't have to wait. You don't have to be stuck and wait for life to happen. Okay, I'm going to have a quick look. I can see there's a quick question and then we're going to move on. Hold on a sec. So Nancy said, working in night shifts is not good for the health, right? Unfortunately, Nancy, it's not. I know for some of us, we don't have that much of a choice because we are in a job where our, we might be saving lives, might be working in a hospital, and I absolutely honor those people who do it. However, unfortunately, when you're working night shifts, your biocircadian rhythm is thrown out. And when your biocircadian rhythm is thrown out, what the studies have shown is people who work night shifts excessively for long periods of time, their cortisol levels and their inflammatory markers are much higher than those that don't. So what I would suggest to you is that if you work in night shift work, is that try as much as you can to reduce the amount of night shifts that you do. And if you are working night shifts, make sure that you get enough sleep on the opposite side, that you don't, just take 2 or 3 hours and then continue your day. I know it's hard, but what you have to try and do is to make up for the sleep that you've lost. Okay, Evelyn has asked, how does this approach compare to bright line eating? Now, bright line eating is an amazing thing. It's Susan Peirce Thompson's brainchild. Now, bright line eating it's very interesting. Susan Peirce Thompson is a PhD, and she, for those of you that don't know, has developed bright line eating because there's very much a science behind people who are bigger. What she suggests is that we come back to eating 3 meals a day and create a lot of structure around planning and exactly what we're going to eat. Now, I would say that approach works for some, and it does. It's been shown to be incredibly effective for a lot of people on helping your body to feel safe, on helping you to get back to your natural set point. However, for me, what it doesn't take into account is the emotional aspect of eating. So the interesting thing is that a lot of people come to me and say, I've tried all these different diets, but my emotions always get in the way, or I feel like something in my mind needs to change. And most of us, unfortunately, who have suffered or who do suffer from overeating, emotional eating, or binge eating, have what I call the deprivation mindset. And if you have that, then it's going to be harder for you to do bright line eating. Although I must say to you, it's one of those things that she's had amazing results with so many people. So I don't want to say that it doesn't work. It absolutely does. But my approach is quite different. We take a deeper dive into what's actually driving your eating behaviors. We take a deeper dive into understanding what the emotional triggers and drivers are, what they are towards your unwanted eating behaviors. Okay, and then Jane has come and said, hi Louise, I have 2 daughters. How can I help them to maintain a healthy set point and prevent them from struggling with emotional eating or overeating like I have? So Jane, what I would say to you is that what's very important is for you to learn yourself and for you to then pass on that information to your daughters. If it's your daughters who are struggling, then ideally they're going to be the ones who will do the deeper work or get the understanding or gain the understanding. And because you've been on this today, you're actually going to get a copy of this. You're going to get access to the recording. So if you'd like to share it with them, you're absolutely welcome to. And then they can decide if they would like to learn more or to continue on. Okay. All right. So I really want to press on. We probably are going to finish just a couple of minutes late, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I hope that's okay with all of you because I really want to share these strategies with you. So I'm going to share my screen again and get moving onto our next section. All right. I am going to talk about overeating, and we're going to go through this really quickly, and then we're going to go straight into the strategies. I'm not going to answer any more questions until the end. If that's okay with you, please feel free to post them. That's absolutely fine. And at the end, I'm happy to stay on the line for sort of 10 or 20 minutes and answer any questions you have. So post them as we go along, but I'm going to walk through the section because I think it's going to be very valuable for you. Okay, so let's talk about overeating. So I wonder if any of you have ever experienced the feeling of having eaten a meal and felt like you are really, really full, physically full, and quite sort of almost feeling a little bit sick, but you feel like your mouth actually wants more. It wants more of the taste. I wonder if anyone's experienced that. I know that I certainly have in my life. Now, what I want to say to you is that there is an incredible concept called the metabolic power of awareness. For those of us who've ever eaten unconsciously and shoveled food in without even noticing that the food is going in, we are affecting our metabolism and our digestion and our nutrient uptake and assimilation dramatically. What we know from studies is that there's something called the cephalic phase digestive response, where when we eat, when we are distracted or we eat fast, we actually lose 60 to 70% of our digestive capacity. So an interesting study showed two groups of people. One group of people who came hungry and ate were asked to eat mindfully and take 20 minutes to eat their meal, undistracted by themselves. And another group who were asked to eat the same meal, they also came hungry. They had headphones on. They were asked to watch a TV show, and then they were going to get quizzed on it afterwards. And what they found was that when they looked at the blood markers and the biomarkers of those that had eaten in a distracted state compared to those in a mindful state, they found that those who had eaten in the distracted state had lost 60 to 70% of their digestive capacity. In other words, their digestive function, their metabolic capacity, and their nutrient uptake and assimilation, which is absolutely huge. So what I'm going to say to you is that eating with mindfulness, eating with attention, with focus, eating with all of our senses is incredibly important. And I'll share a strategy with you in a moment around that. Okay, what's the traditional approach to weight loss and dieting? The traditional approach is we're in a war with our body. It's all about fixing, about fighting, about warring. But what if I had to come to you and say that there's an alternative view, which is the eating psychology view? What if overeating is not a willpower problem? What if it is the symptom of a deeper problem rather than the problem itself? And I just want you to consider that for a moment. What if your weight loss and what if your unwanted eating behaviors are not the problem? What if they are just an expression of a deeper disharmony within you? Okay. Why do we eat compulsively? We eat compulsively for a number of reasons, which I'm going to share with you now. And you may find that some of these resonate with you. And if they do, it's absolutely food for thought. And it's one of those things that we can take a deeper dive into. As human beings, we eat compulsively for a number of reasons. And I'm going to share just a few of these with you right now. And then we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into one of them. We eat compulsively because it's a powerful stress reliever. Our cortisol levels drop when we start eating. It's a very primal thing to eat. And so the body learns that eating is something that brings our stress levels down. We eat compulsively because body wisdom is attempting to correct itself nutritionally. Now, what do I mean by that? Have any of you ever noticed that during the day, during the course of the morning, you eat really well, you have a good breakfast, you make the right choices throughout the morning, you get to lunchtime, and it starts to get a little bit wobbly. And by the time you reach the afternoon, you're absolutely ravenous. And you're still trying to resist. By the time you get home after dinner, everything goes crazy and you have a binge. Now what happens is we restrict our calories, or we restrict our fat, or we don't eat properly, or we don't get enough nutrition in the morning. By the time we get to the evening, the body's going to correct itself. It's going to nutritionally correct itself. So what's really, really important for us to do is to regulate our eating rhythm and to make sure that we eat enough nutritional food in the first part of the day. And again, I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. Why else do we eat compulsively? We eat compulsively because it numbs us out from our uncomfortable feelings. It's a way of us checking out. We eat compulsively because it grounds us and brings us back into the present moment. It takes us out of our head and out of the stress response and back into our bodies. We eat compulsively because for many of us, it's a substitute for pleasure, for love, and for connectedness. And for many of us, in particular women, compulsive eating also fills us up where we feel empty or lonely. Many of my clients have come to me over the years and said, I often feel like I'm filling a hole, like it's empty inside and I want to fill up. So I wonder if any of those have resonated with you. And if you have, then I want you to know that you're not alone. There are other reasons why we eat compulsively. And when we're in our groups, we take a deep dive into understanding what it is for you. Okay. but these are probably the most common ones that come up that I see in practice. So remember that what we're trying to do is to get you back to a state of natural eating so that you don't have to be a compulsive eater, an overeater, emotional eater, or binge eater, so that you don't have to go from the one extreme of dieting over to the overeating and emotional eating on the other side. We want you to be able to sit in the natural eating quadrant in the middle. So the paradox of our time in history is that we live in a time with more food choice and supply than we have ever had, yet many of us are nutritionally starving. And John Gabriel says, you can be eating until your heart's content, but as long as you're starving on a nutritional basis, your body is going to stay hungry to get those specific nutrients. So what we're trying to tell you here is compulsive eating can very much, or in particular overeating, can very much be a result of the fact that you're not getting enough nutrients in your diet. So if you're not getting enough nutrition, especially in the first part of the day, the body's going to drive you to eat and eat and eat and eat and eat until it gets what it needs. It's constantly scanning. It's constantly checking. All right. I want to say to you that the way that we do food is the way we do life. If you think about yourself and you think about the way that you do your life or the way that you run your life, you'll find that if you're the kind of person who's busy and runs from place to place all the time, you're probably going to be somebody who eats distracted and who eats fast. Okay. So what is the eating psychology approach to compulsive eating? The eating psychology approach to compulsive eating is that we look at the root cause of the eating or body issue. We are looking at how can we address the root cause of what's underneath. Not just the symptom or behavior. If we can heal out the root cause and give you strategies to become more present with what's going on inside and what the message is, then your emotional eating and your binge eating and your compulsive eating will fall away. What we're going to help you to do is to work with the challenge rather than against it and welcome it as a means to help it leave. Now, I know that this is a very new way of looking at things, and I know that it's a very new concept, but it is, as far as I'm concerned, the only way for you to sustainably and truly heal your eating behaviors. And Mark David says, and he's one of my mentors, and I studied eating psychology with him, before you attempt to cast out a bad habit, thank it for its teachings. If you can learn from its teachings, you can heal your behavior. Okay. All right. So I want to share with you just briefly one of the most common reasons for compulsive eating. And then I want to give you one strategy before we move into our 5 keys. I want to give you one strategy to help you to heal this particular one. Now, Carl Jung says that the foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. And what he means by this is that most of us have we all have uncomfortable feelings, but most of us who are on this call, or most of us who experience issues with food, use food to numb out our uncomfortable feelings. We may have grown up in a household like myself where the uncomfortable feelings were not talked about, where we weren't given the opportunity as children to express our feelings. So what I want to ask you to do is to consider for yourself, what do you do with your uncomfortable feelings? How comfortable are you with feeling your feelings? And I would probably assume that most of you, and I would say I'm probably right, are not very good at sharing your feelings. And it may not necessarily be that you're not very good at sharing your feelings with other people, but actually being with your feelings yourself. Very often when we are using food to numb out, when we start to feel stressed or we feel uncomfortable feelings, we move to food. So I want you to think about this. An uncomfortable feeling that I suppressed in the past month was, and I wonder if you can think of one particular incident recently where you may have had a feeling that you ate away, or that you decided you wanted a drink, or that you decided that you were going to go and do something else. Rather than deal with the feeling, what did you do? And then I would love you to think, what would happen if you allowed this feeling to be known or heard? And is there any fear attached with this feeling? Is there any fear attached with feeling this feeling? And just drop into your body for a moment. And as you consider that feeling, just notice where it is in your body. Close your eyes. And ask yourself the question, in this moment, what am I feeling, or what was I feeling? Think of that uncomfortable feeling. And just see if you can notice where in your body you may be feeling it. And then notice if it's got any colors. Notice if it's got any edges or any texture. And just observing without judgment. Not getting sucked into or lost in the feeling, just noticing it. And what you'll probably notice is as you start to observe, and as you continue to observe, feeling will dissolve, or it'll move, it'll change shape. Now, this may not be happening for you right now because it's hard for you to reflect back and bring a feeling to you very strongly. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is in the next time, whether it's today or tomorrow, over the course of the weekend, next time that you feel an uncomfortable feeling come up, rather than ignoring it, suppressing it, or eating it away, asking yourself the question, just dropping into your body and asking yourself the question, in this moment, what am I actually feeling? And then just observe and just allow the feeling to be there. Allow yourself to experience it rather than pushing it away. And what you'll notice is that as the feeling starts to dissolve, as it starts to change shape or move or change color, that the urge will disappear. And we call this urge surfing. It's the first step in a 4-step process that I take people through when we start to deal with emotional eating, overeating, and binge eating. It can be very helpful for you to just do the first step. For some of us, we need to continue to go through to step 4. But just dropping into your body and feeling that feeling without getting lost in it, just observing it. Okay, taking a long deep breath in. All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into our strategies. We're coming up to 12 o'clock. So it's probably only going to take us another 5 or 10 minutes through the strategies. And then I'm going to open the line for some questions. For those of you who'd like to stay on, please feel free to stay on and have your questions answered. But if you need to go, I completely understand as we are coming up to time. Okay, all right. I'm just going to move forward to our strategies. All right. So here you are today, and you come on this call for 5 strategies to start transforming your relationship with food in your body. And what I want to give you today is I want to just give you 5 very simple but solid strategies that you can start implementing straight away that can help you to start transforming your relationship with food in your body. Okay. So strategy number 1. Strategy number 1 is to slow down and to eat with all of your senses. Now, mindful eating is a concept that some of you may have been experienced or exposed to, may have experienced or been exposed to in the past. And what I'm going to say to you is that if you don't eat mindfully, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get on top of your overeating. Overeating, which is just that part of us, it's not emotional eating or binge eating, it's just that part of us that eats past the point of fullness. When we eat mindfully, when we slow down and we eat with all of our senses, we can pretty much overcome our overeating. For the most part, you can stop your overeating if you can slow down and eat with all of your senses. So what do we know? What happens when we eat when we're distracted? We lose 60 to 70% of our digestive and metabolic efficiency. We can end up with digestive upset, bowel disorders, low immunity, fatigue after meals. And we generally, if we eat fast or we eat distracted, we'll always end up compulsive eating, but especially in the evenings. So these are the eating guidelines that I share, and these are one of the cornerstones or foundational principles of mindful eating. Before you even start eating, you need to be sitting down. No standing up. Make sure that this is a non-negotiable, that you are sitting down. Before you pick up your knife and fork, take 10 long, deep breaths. In through the nose and out through the nose, or in through the nose and out through the mouth. Expand your belly, do abdominal breathing. What this does is it tricks your body into believing that it's in the relaxation response, and it gives oxygen to digestion. It allows you to digest your food, and it signals the body that it's time for you to start metabolizing. The next guideline is no distractions. No iPhone, no TV, no nothing. Just you focused on your food, eating with your 5 senses, eating with your sense of smell, your sense of taste. You're eating with your eyes, thinking about the food, giving gratitude for the food. Ideally, you should be taking 20 minutes to eat your meal. Now, I know if you're a fast eater, that can be pretty tough. It can be hard to suddenly stretch it out to 20 minutes. What I'm going to suggest is that you just start by doubling it. If you normally took 2 minutes to eat, make it 4, and then eventually make it 8, and then make it 16. And so we work our way up to 20 minutes. But ideally, for a main meal, you are eating 20 minutes per meal. And then obviously eating with awareness is really, really important. Now, I often get asked the question, but what about eating with other people? Isn't that a distraction? And what I will say to you is that we are primal beings who are programmed to experience pleasure from food, who are programmed to experience connection with others. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with you eating with others. In fact, it releases endorphins, especially if it's in a positive environment. But what I will say to you is that try and focus on your food at the same time as you are connecting. The two are very, very important. Okay, so that's our first strategy, slowing down with your eating and eating with all of your senses. Strategy number 2, eat nutritionally dense food. Now, this may seem, again, like a little bit of a no-brainer. And you may say, but Louise, we all know that eating nutritionally dense food is important. And of course, most of us try. But I'm going to highlight to you why it's so important. If you don't eat nutritionally dense food, your body can't regulate its appetite. What we know about eating nutritionally dense food is that it helps to regulate appetite and it helps to regulate blood sugar. So if we eat nutritionally dense food, in particular in the first part of the day, so I'm going to suggest to you that you might, along with everything else that you have to eat during the day, instead of taking away and only eating nutritionally dense food, add in. So make yourself a green juice, or go to Top Juice and get yourself a green juice, or on a daily basis, so that you know that you're getting the nutrition that you need. Rather than taking away so that you feel deprived, add in. Add the nutritionally dense food so that you regulate your appetite, so that you regulate your blood sugar, so that your body is not scanning for nutrients all the time and then driving you to eat compulsively. Okay. Strategy number 3 is to eat a high protein, high fat breakfast and lunch. Now, why do I tell you to eat a high protein, high fat breakfast and lunch? What we know is that when we eat protein and good fats for breakfast, our metabolism is stoked. It's almost like you're stoking the fire of your metabolism. So when you eat a good quality protein, and it doesn't have to be meat if you're a vegetarian, but you eat a good quality protein and a good quality fat breakfast, and then again at lunchtime, your metabolism is going to be working far more efficiently than if you eat carbohydrates. Your blood sugar will be regulated and your appetite will be regulated. So high protein, high fat breakfast and lunch regulates your appetite, it regulates your blood sugar, and it helps with your metabolism. If you need some breakfast ideas, I'm happy to share those with you. You can pop me an email after this, and I'm happy to share with you some breakfast ideas so that you can get going on having a really good, solid protein breakfast and lunch. Okay, strategy number 4, watch the way that you speak to yourself. Now, I've talked about this briefly before, but I'm just going to reiterate it one more time. If you are highly critical of yourself, you are actually throwing petrol onto the fire of your compulsive eating. When we go through the cycle of guilt and shame through compulsive eating, when we binge eat or we overeat or we compulsively eat, we feel shame. We actually feel the fire, and it's those negative feelings and the suppression of them that fuels the fire. So if you can actually find some strategies to quieten the inner critic, to experience or to start to experience more self-compassion, you'll find that it'll make a massive difference to the power that your overeating, compulsive eating, or binge eating has over you. And again, it's something that we spend a lot of time doing. For those of you, I think there's a couple of you on this call who've been through, my groups or worked with me in a one-to-one capacity. You will know how much time we spend on self-compassion and how important it is. It's such a big part of the puzzle. Okay. And I want you to know that everything that you need to know is within you. Listen, feel, and trust the body's wisdom. If you haven't read this book, I suggest you go and read it. Dan Millen wrote The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's an absolutely incredible book about connecting with your body and about the power that your body has. Having said that, and I often say this to my clients, listening to your body can be like trying to hear a pin drop at Niagara Falls. It's not an easy thing to do, to get in touch with your body and start to listen to it. But once you get it, it is the most beautiful, enriching, fulfilling, and meaningful thing in the world. And like Naomi says, once you start to connect with your body on a deeper level, that's when life really, truly starts. Okay. Our last strategy for today. Strategy number 5, follow a natural eating rhythm. Now, whether or not you know this, you may or may not know this, as primal beings, as human beings, as mammals, our metabolism actually follows a natural eating rhythm. When we eat breakfast in the morning, before 9:30 in the morning, so anytime between 6 and 9:30 in the morning, our metabolism, especially if we have a high protein breakfast, our metabolism actually gets sparked up. It's like we've thrown petrol or we've stoked the fire, the metabolic fire. And our metabolisms naturally follow a sharp increase. And our metabolisms increase and peak at around 12 to 1:30 in the afternoon. So when the sun is at its highest, we are actually at our most efficient metabolically. So we should technically be eating a big breakfast and an even bigger lunch, because that is when our metabolism is at its highest. Now, if you push most of your calories and your protein and fat into the first part of the day, I'm not saying we shouldn't have any carbs in the first part of the day, of course you should, but making sure we have adequate protein, fat, and nutrients in the first part of the day, and that we're eating a really good solid breakfast and lunch, you'll find that your desire to overeat and to compulsively eat in the afternoon and the evenings will drop dramatically. It's a really, really important part of eating psychology and of healing our eating patterns, is to follow a natural eating rhythm, is to follow the eating rhythm that our body naturally follows, one that we followed for thousands and thousands of years of evolution. Ideally, we should be having a smaller dinner, and we should be eating earlier on, between sort of 5 and 7 if we can. It's not always possible, because what we want is we want the body to be able to rest when we sleep and not be digesting food, so that we can wake up in the morning hungry again after half an hour or 60 minutes of waking up. We should be hungry. Okay. All right. I see there's some questions coming up, and I'm just going to briefly recap what we've learned today, and then we're going to go into questions and finish up. And then I'm also going to share with you briefly the opportunity, if you'd like, of some free coaching with me. I'll chat to you about that in a moment. Okay, so what have we learned today? We've learned that dieting causes the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. We've learned that dieting increases our set point and it creates disordered eating. We've learned what a set point is, and we've learned how to positively impact it and what negatively impacts it. We've learned that stress is a major cause of weight gain. And we've learned that there are multiple stressors to the body, not just emotional stress, and that we have a fair amount of control over how stressed or toxic our bodies actually are. We've learned that willpower is mostly unconscious. It's something that's out of our conscious control. We've also learned about the causes of compulsive eating. And I've shared with you 5 strategies to start transforming your relationship with food and with your body. Number 1, to slow down with your eating. Number 2, to eat nutritionally dense food, in particular in the first part of the day, to eat a high protein and high fat breakfast and lunch. to watch the way that you speak to yourself, and then to follow a natural eating rhythm. Okay. So before we move to questions, I would love for you just to post in the comments box, just to post one word or sentence that you're going to take forward with you from today. I would love for you to actually celebrate anything that you've learned. And as I said, it can just be one word, or it could be a couple of words. I'd love to see those come up in the comments box. If you can post those now. And I can see that Dominia has raised her hand, and I'm going to answer her question in a moment. All right, so before we get to questions, and while you're posting your celebrations, I just want to share with you something that I am going to offer you as a gift for being on this masterclass today. I only run this masterclass twice a year. I love running this masterclass. I love sharing and giving back. And I have I make available in my schedule every month, but in particular the months that I run this masterclass, I make a limited number of spots available for what we call a Food Body Love breakthrough session, or a Food Body breakthrough session. And what these sessions are, they are 30-minute sessions, and it's essentially a session of discovery. It's for you and I to sit down over the phone or on Skype, and to really take a deeper dive and uncover what it is for you that might be driving your unwanted eating behaviors, and for me to really hone in and to see if I can use my skills to kind of get to develop a roadmap for you that kind of is very clear in showing you where it is that you need to go. And what I want for you in that session is to give you value, but to really give you at least one strategy that you can walk away with. What I will also share with you briefly on that session is I'll share a little bit more about eating psychology. I'll share a little bit more about what it is that I do. And then you can actually make a decision whether or not you would like to continue to do the work. If you choose not to, I'm absolutely not tied to the outcome. I am there to give back to you, to give you that session, and to give you some strategies to walk away with. And I absolutely am going to give you value in that session. I really want you to know I'm not tied to the outcome. I'm there to help you. So if you would like to take me up on a Food Body breakthrough session, there are a limited number of those, and it's only for people who are on the call today. Please feel free to send me an email with the subject line discovery session, and send it to louise@louisejeffrey.com, and either myself or my assistant Joe will get back to you, and we'll come back and book you in the course of the next, anything from sort of 1 to 4 weeks. It may, depending on, if you come a little bit later, it might be that you have to get onto a waiting list and only speak to me in 3 or 4 weeks, but we'll do whatever we can to get you in. So if you'd like to take me up on that discovery session, please do so. And I really want to help you to get where it is that you want to go. For those of you who need to leave now, just to let you know that there is a Q&A call scheduled for Tuesday the 25th, so that's this Tuesday coming at 10 a.m. Australian time, and I'll be there to answer any questions that you have. I'll send this all to you on a follow-up email. You'll get all the details of the call, so don't worry if you have to go and you can't get your questions answered now. But for those of you who'd like to stay on, I'm gonna take your questions now and answer those. And I just want to say thank you. It's been an absolute honor to share in this journey with you. I absolutely love the work that I do, and I just want to honor you for being here. I really, really do. All right, I'm going to stop the share now and go to questions. All right, so feel free to put your camera on if you would like. I am just going to switch off the heater in my room if you give me a sec. It's a little bit warm in here. All right. Okie dokie. So I'm going to go, if that's okay, just to have a look at the comments. I just want to go. A couple of people have said they've got to go, but thank you again. Beautiful comments here. Inner love. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Oh, it's beautiful. Wonderful. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. more self-love and patience with my eating and myself. Really inspiring. Thank you. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I am going to go just to, first of all, I'm just going to go to Dom on the line, and I'm going to unmute you now, Dom. There we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi. How are you doing?
Good.
All right, my love. What question do you have for me?
Well, I was trying to work out the comments when I raised my hand, so I could. That my comment is really about the stress. Because I stay up late working, and that's when I overeat. It's definitely up late, and you know, maybe it's a procrastination thing. Maybe it's all too hard. I'll eat something and then I can come back to this later. But I think that's definitely the big thing for me.
Okay, my love. And how do you feel about your eating at night? So when you're actually in that moment,
I feel terrible.
You feel terrible about it. Okay. And how do you feel about your work? Do you enjoy your work, or you don't really enjoy your work?
At times I do, but in the last couple of months I've been way overworked, and it's, you know, I was saying to my mum that probably it's also affecting my sleep, because I'm up till, you know, 12 o'clock to 1:30 every night working. Wow. So then when I'm getting up with the kids at night and up at 6:30 in the morning, it's
wow. Wow. You know, Dom, it's one of those tough things. You know, I think being a woman and being a mum, most of us are faced with the difficulty of trying to be spaghetti person, spaghetti mother, spaghetti woman, having our finger in so many pies, and especially if you work from home and you're working at night, it's really, really difficult. And I just want to tell you that I resonate deeply with what you're experiencing. And I think a lot of women on this call would also say that they would resonate deeply with the fact that, you know, late night eating is a big problem for them. What I'm going to suggest to you, you know, in terms of a strategy around is just to make sure that you're getting your nutrients in the first part of the day is the first part. Following some of the strategies that I've told.
Yeah.
Your little one on the line. I'm just going to mute you for a sec, okay? So is to make sure that you follow the strategies that I've given you, but also to spend some time. And if you do want to do a discovery session, you and I can actually talk about this. Is to spend some more time setting some very clear boundaries for yourself around when you work, how you work, because for a lot of us, when we work late at night, we actually start to feel resentful towards the work. It creates stress. Cortisol levels go up, and often cortisol levels actually spike naturally anyway at 10 o'clock at night. And so you're probably stress eating, not just because you're resentful of the work that you're doing, but because you're tired and your cortisol levels are high. So it's ways of helping you to be able to have enough balance that you're very structured when you do work at night, and that we try and help you with ways that you can actually bring that back. Yeah, as well as helping you with strategies around stress eating anyway. That's probably going to be a big part of it too. So I hope, was that helpful for you, love, at all?
Most definitely. And, you know, I started off this year when I went back from maternity leave saying, okay, I'm going to have boundaries. I'm going to go, this is the point at night I'm not going to work past, and blah, blah, blah. And I just ignored them all. So I definitely need some strategies to get that all back into place and make myself, I think it's about making myself, knowing that myself is more important. You know, work is work, but my health and everything else that comes from that is more important than that. So
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's the self-care piece and the self-love piece. Even though self-love may sound a little bit like a woo-woo term, it's one of those things that is just so incredibly important. And as I say, because I work with women, mainly I see this all the time, that one of the biggest things that I help women to do is to be able to come back to a place of self-love, is to be able to put yourself first. And that doesn't mean putting other people last. It doesn't mean it's selfish. It means creating very strong boundaries around your own emotions, around your own structure in your own life. It's such an important part of healing your eating. It really, really is. Okay, my love. Wonderful. Did you have any other questions?
No, thank you. That's awesome.
Okay. All right, my love. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the call.
Thank you.
And Sue. Bye. Bye. Okay, so let's see if anybody else has raised their hand. I'm just having a look, and then I'm going to go down to the comments box. Okay. Thank you, Naomi, for saying that I'm taking home that we are fascinating beings. And Jane says, more self-love and patience with my eating and myself. Mindful eating, beautiful. Many thanks for your giving. Thank you, Janine, for being here. Okay. Okay. Couldn't locate the mic and just found the dialog box. Okay. Janine, you haven't found the mic? No? Okay, not to worry. If you haven't, that's fine. Please feel free to post your question if you do have one on the thing, and I'll answer it now. Okay, Jane has said, I tend to eat too much of the wrong stuff as a way to treat myself. I guess when I'm not coping with the overwhelmingness of life, I feel like I need to treat me. I'm realizing now that this is a wrong form of self-love. Absolutely, my love. So many women come onto the program or come and see me and say, you know, I have this eating behavior, which is that I end up telling myself that I deserve it. When I feel overwhelmed, I'm like, well, I'm just going to eat because it's a way of coping, or it's a way of telling myself that I deserve it, and then I'm treating myself. But essentially, if we're using food to treat ourselves when we're not hungry, and it's not to say that we can't use food to treat ourselves sometimes, really consciously and really mindfully, but when we're using food to treat ourselves in an unconscious way, we need to find strategies and ways to help you to come to a level of self-care and self-love without using food. And there are fantastic strategies and tools that we use to try and help you to kind of get to that point. But what a beautiful insight to have, Jane, and thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm just going to go back and see if there's any other questions I may have missed. Thank you for all your beautiful comments. Everybody has sent such lovely comments. Thank you. So Evelyn has said, I follow Bright Line Eating. Would your approach complement what I'm already doing? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we deal with more the emotional part. Absolutely, we do have structure around nutrition, but I'm not going to I give you more of a scaffolding. If you've already got your scaffolding, which is your nutritional scaffold might be Bright Line Eating, I'm absolutely fine with that. We'll take a deeper dive into the emotional side of things and into your drivers and triggers. So I hope that helps you, Evelyn. All right. Beautiful. Okay. I think that is all of the questions that I can see. Oh, beautiful. Thank you, lovely. Thank you, everybody, for all the gratitude. Love the clues about how to eat dinner. No more watching TV. Yes, absolutely, Janine. And Janine, you might find that it's a little bit difficult. You might find that it, I don't know whether you live alone or you don't, but sometimes people who live alone find it really, really hard to eat by themselves because they're kind of faced with the loneliness or with the quiet space. Or if you are with someone, sometimes it's hard for them to agree to eat mindfully and eat at the table without the TV on. But what I'm going to suggest is that you give it a try and that you kind of push on through, because it really is one of those things, mindful eating, that makes a massive difference to our overeating, and it makes a massive difference to our relationship with food. It really does. Okay. All right. Here we go. Beautiful. So Anna Leila, I hope I've said it right, Anna Leila has said, what if you're not hungry in the morning? Can you just have a small chia pudding with fruit? Anna Leila, if you're not hungry in the morning, what I'm going to suggest that you do when you first start shifting your eating rhythm from, if you're not hungry in the morning, you'll find in the beginning you won't be hungry, is to eat something small, absolutely. But what I'm going to suggest is that it's probably not a chia pudding and fruit, that it's some form of protein. Now I know that chia seeds do have protein in them, and that's great, fantastic. But it's not a substantial enough protein to kind of get your metabolism going. I would say have a little bit of fruit and maybe have If you're not a vegan, have some eggs. You could have 1 boiled egg or 2 boiled eggs. Or you could just have a little bit of something small, a little bit of smoked salmon, or some avocado with a little bit of goat's cheese, or whatever it is. Absolutely, have that little bit, and then wait. You'll probably find 1 to 2 hours later, you'll actually be really hungry, because that small amount of food that you have in the morning will spark your metabolism. It'll get your metabolism going. And you'll find that as you start to bring your food back to eat more in the morning and more at lunchtime, you'll be inclined to eat less in the evening, which means you'll wake up hungrier. So what we normally find is after 3 or 4 weeks that we're generally more hungry in the morning. If you're not, then continue to have small meal in the morning and then have something else mid-morning at sort of 11 when you find that you're hungry. I hope that's helpful, love. I hope that answers your question. You've also said I'm not getting enough sleep at night because of being a mother. Sure. And it doesn't help my morning appetite. Absolutely. Being a mum is tough when we've got kids that wake up, if you've got babies and you're breastfeeding and your blood sugar's all over the place, and you just got to do what you can. You just absolutely have to do what you can. Have to try and catch up on sleep during the day if you're a new mum, or or you've got children that wake up, rather than doing the housework. See if you can have a little cat nap. There's some really interesting research that also shows that 10 to 20 minutes of power nap during the day can have a dramatic impact on our metabolism and on our blood sugar. So what's really important for you is, if you find that you're absolutely exhausted, when your child goes to sleep at lunchtime, if he or she does, make sure you go to sleep. Make sure you have that rest, and make sure that you have, even if it's just a 10 to 20 minute power nap. Okay. And Jane has said, aside from my personal realizations, mindful eating and making time for mindfulness has been a massive takeaway from this session. Oh, beautiful, Jane. I'm so glad that it was helpful. All right. That's it, I think. It's 12:30 now. Thank you all for staying on the line until the end. I am going to send you all an email after this. It will have Naomi's link to her amazing ebook. I've read the ebook. It's just fantastic, guys. You've got to read that ebook. And I'll send that to you on an email. I'll also send you a link to the recording. And I'll send you that email address, which is louise@louisejeffrey.com, if you would like to take me up on a discovery session. Anyway, I'm sending you all love, and I'm sending you thanks, and I'm sending you so much transformation and empowerment on your healing journey. And I will, I'm sure, hopefully see some of you again. All right. Bye for now. Bye.